Hello, welcome back to Dark Patterns. Today we're going to talk about love. Oh, first, to fix my camera. There we go. Good enough for government work. All right. Today we're going to talk about selling love, or giving it away for free, depending. So I'll give everybody a couple minutes to come in. And while we're working on that, let's talk a little bit about last time. So last time you got to live through having your class and grade and everything get gamified. And many of you objected that perhaps that shouldn't be gamified, and many of you were cool with it, admittedly. Although for those of you who were cool with it, I'd like you to recall how much your peers who were not cool with it were not cool with it. Have you ever seen them so animated about anything before? This is my experience on gamification, not my opinion, but my factual experience is that the people who don't like things being gamified really don't like it. They absolutely hate it. So just from a business perspective, something to think about is that if you're ever in a situation where you have to decide whether or not you're going to gamify your software, consider that there's a good chance that you're going to make about 20% of your user base very, very angry. That's just the way it works. Whether or not it's worth it or not, I can't answer that, but I can tell you for certain that anything that you try to gamify will leave a certain proportion of the population very, very upset with you. The usual response is something like, okay, boomer, but maybe they have a point. Maybe everything shouldn't be gamified. Or maybe everything should. Should we gamify something like banking? Well, we kind of already do. Banks all have this stupid little game you can play, an app where you check in every day. They all have these weird shell shuffling games where you move your money into a savings account or something or another, and they show you how you're earning over time. We know for sure that things like investment are extremely gamified. I mean, things like Robinhood and Coinbase are just straight up, you're playing a video game on those things, essentially, and they're designed that way, too. Money is your score, or something like that, or maybe your percent gains is your score, but either way, you're definitely playing a game. Whether that's a good thing or not, up to you, but those are kind of the two most serious industries that we have, is the money. So what if we go even more serious? What if applying for citizenship or getting your driver's license becomes a game too? Well, we're not there yet as a society, but we could be if we continue along the path that we're on. What will the world be like when everything is game-like? And from your observation last time, did the quality of the discussion go up or down? Did it get better or worse? Did the content get better or worse? Certainly the quantity went up. I think that's without question. And again, not my opinion, but fact that when you gamify things, people will engage more frequently and you will have more engagement. The question is whether or not it's better engagement, but it's almost unquestionable that more people will engage with a well-made, obviously if you make the game terrible, it's not going to be engaged, but more people will engage with a well-made game than a well-made, not gamified solution. Whether or not their engagement is a net benefit, well, that's something that's up to you. We'll probably talk about gamification again as it continues to thread through some of our future topics. But let's talk about one of the first things that software decided to turn into a game, which is romance, dating, people connecting with one another. Romance was one of the first things that software gamified. Gamified it well before anybody had decent internet. 2004 is when OkCupid launched. Most of us still had dial-up at that point. But most of you were also born right around that point. So most of you have grown up with ubiquitous, I should say dating apps, but data apps is actually a pretty appropriate description of them too, since they certainly know a great deal about you. And at this point, about half, by some stats 40%, but getting close to 50%, of all U.S. couples now meet online, of all new couples. And even among those that didn't necessarily meet online, many of them communicate primarily online at the beginning of the relationship. So you can say that the internet in one form or another is well responsible for half or probably more than half of all relationships. in the United States at least. Most of the data we're going to be looking at comes from OkCupid. OkCupid really had the best opportunity to get data, and they were kind enough to distribute most of it. The things that OkCupid learned were of tremendous value to humanity in terms of what we discovered about how men and women deal with one another and how people in general deal with one another in private when nobody knows the decisions that they're making. So your decision on whether or not to respond to somebody on a dating site is yours and yours alone, and nobody but you and the other person will know about it. Well, except OkCupid also knows. And they took a lot of this data anonymously and collected it together. One of their founders, this person who wrote the book that I'm referring to mostly, Christian Rudder, whose name I also spelled incorrectly, he's primarily a data scientist, not necessarily a software developer, and his job was to optimize OkCupid by collecting data. This is one of the founding members. A lot of this data was once available on the OkCupid blog. Some of it still is. Some of it you can still find on the internet. Most of the graphs we're going to look at today you can still find. But a lot of the data that was collected was also wiped from the internet because in the wake of, well, the shifting political climate, a lot of the discoveries that were made were a little bit too uncomfortable to remain where they are. And OkCupid is still a business. They want to run a business, and they didn't want to be in the center of a shitstorm, so they just decided to take it down. But you can still find most of it, including some of the more controversial stuff, in the book that I'm using. So if you're interested in seeing the whole story, get that book. And of course, you can find a lot of it on the Internet Archive, thanks to their work. So we're not going to go through the most controversial stuff today, but we'll go through some of it. And our goal going today, okay, is we're going to consider the following question. How can we optimize a dating application to make as much money as possible? How many people are there, actually? Good question from Discord. Is it just you? How many other people showed up? As we go through this unit, again, consider that question. How do you optimize for making as much money as possible? Because that's really what you want to do if you run a dating application. Or is it? Maybe up to you. But it's probably something that's important to you to make as much money as possible. Well, you have to get people to join. If people don't sign up, then of course they're not going to pay. And you have to get them to stick around, although not necessarily. I mean, you could charge them per relationship or something, but you have to get them to stick around at least long enough. Oh, well, if you guys are there, I'll definitely stop by after. So you have to get people to stick around. You have to get people to pay. And presumably you have to give them value to pay, and presumably the value in a dating application is to have people find a relationship or whatever it is that they're looking for. So some of these I'm kind of taking for granted, but again, keep the question in mind as we go. How do you get a dating application to generate as much money as possible? And bear in mind that this is a market today that has a lot of competition. So you can't just say be as mean and stupid and greedy as possible. You have to be smart as well. If your dating app sucks, then nobody's going to use it. So as you're thinking about optimizing the money, bear in mind that it's a highly competitive market. Okay, so we're going to talk about men and women and how they differ. We're going to talk about their group preferences and behavior. This is in the spirit, again, of you answering that question, how to optimize dating software to make the most money. If you just show people 100 other people who are also signed up and live in their area, you're not optimizing for money. You're not really optimizing for anything. But although men and women are different, group characteristics are not that useful on an individual level. Keep that in mind. That is, if men do something more often, that doesn't mean that a specific person who is a man is probably doing that thing. It also doesn't mean that a woman who does something that women do more often is obviously doing that thing. It means that if Y is a man and X is something that people might do, then Y is slightly likelier to do X than somebody else, let's say Z, who is a woman. The genders have much more in common than they have different. They share a lot more alike than they differ. So as we talk about group preferences, keep in mind that group preferences don't really affect individual preferences at all. A particular man or a particular woman might have whatever preferences they have. The preferences that those populations have on average doesn't really have anything to do with that. So be a grown-up, and don't take it personally if men are more likely to do something that's unfavorable or women are more likely to do something unfavorable, because it doesn't matter. We'll start with a controversial example, the most controversial, or I don't know, the one that shows the data that the most people don't expect, I guess. So let's say that we went to America and we picked 1,000 men, we picked 1,000 women. Let's say they're aged about 25 years old. So they're all physically healthy approximately, and there's a bunch of them. Rank those people by how fast they can throw a baseball. So we line up the 1,000 men, they all throw a baseball. We line up the 1,000 women, they all throw a baseball. And then we take the guy who's right in the middle, the 500th. So half the people throw a baseball faster than he does, half the men throw a baseball slower than he does. We're ranking men and women separately, so the man is right in the middle of the men. He's exactly half the men throw faster, exactly half the men throw slower. In either chat, tell me how many women can throw a ball faster than that guy. All right, so type your answer in either chat when you have it. Again, picked 1,000 men, we picked 1,000 women, who are aged about 25 years old, all healthy, whatever. We picked them from anywhere in America at random, so there's no rhyme or reason to our selection, other than that they're probably healthy. We rank them by how fast they can throw a baseball, they get their best bet, best shot, and we pick the guy who's right in the middle of the rankings. Half throw faster, half throw slower. How many women can throw a ball faster? Kind of cheating if you've played baseball or softball, as you've probably seen it play out in real life, but think about it. Now again, you're picking the guy right in the middle, right? So statistically speaking, the guy right in the middle is not a dude that works out every day, not particularly physically fit, not particularly physically unfit, just an average dude. Significant proportion of Americans physically exercise, so it's likely that this person does, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour, or whatever the American does of light exercise a day, but so do the women, so there's no difference there. They're just as likely to be obese and whatnot. Those statistics are pretty close to lining up, so how many women can throw a ball faster than Joe average right in the middle? So someone said 50, somebody said none. Let's get at least one more answer before I reveal the real answer. And of course, you could, just by randomness, end up with a population that's a little different than the average. But when you have 1,000 people, it's a pretty strong sample size. So you're going to get pretty close to the figure that it actually is. You can repeat the experiment and multiply the number of people you grab by 10. It's going to come out pretty similar. So we got 1, we got 75, 76, 100. The answer is about 1. So men have about 3 standard deviations in upper body strength advantage, and that's pretty much the biggest disparity between the two genders. It's a bigger disparity than stuff like height. It's a much bigger disparity than stuff like aerobic ability and etc. Upper body strength is where men and women differ the most. So it's about 1 to 99.9%. So the guy right in the middle is stronger than 99.9% of women, which is 999 out of 1,000. If you look at the upper body strength numbers from some random research paper I found, the bell curves are about the same. This is men at the top, women at the bottom, so most people are roughly in the middle. This is 2 different cohorts of people entering the military. But look at the actual numbers, and you'll see that the top of the top in the women's scores, about 878, those guys aren't even in the middle on the men's bar graph. So this guy, Joe Schmo, right in the center here, who's at a 976, is off the chart on the women's scale. He is well able to, this is actually stuff like bench presses and like pull-ups and stuff. That kind of upper body strength is actually more indicative. Throwing a baseball has a little bit more full body capability, so the disparity might not be as large. But for most things that are almost entirely upper body focused, like weightlifting, and throwing is definitely very upper body focused, you got a 99.9% disparity. But let's say you got 2 people, you got Bob and Susie, and they're throwing baseballs, and Bob's a man and Susie's a woman. Who throws the faster baseball in this pairing? Well, obviously you don't know. You don't know until you try. Now, it's much more likely that it's going to be Bob, right? But it doesn't mean that it's Bob for sure. And it's not even that good of odds if you line them up. Like, let's say I'm going to pick somebody in the men and somebody in the women at average. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to just run my mouse left and right and stop somewhere. Boom. Oh, crap. I picked weak man. Let's go women. Boom. Oh, the woman won. And of course, I can't set that up because although my reflexes are good, they are not good enough to rig the wiggle the mouse as fast as possible game, that's for sure. So yeah, you don't know until you try. And the odds aren't even that great. You can work them out mathematically. It's something like Bob's got like an 80% chance or something like that to be the faster baseball thrower. 80% is not even that good of a bet. It's far from a sure thing. And this is probably the largest disparity between the two genders. So anything that we look at is going to be much smaller than this, statistically speaking. So definitely, this is going to be bigger than anything that we talk about, the disparity in strength. So let's move on to romance and learn some facts about men and women in the romantic sense. And remember to keep in mind that we are using this information to help us determine how to optimize making the most money, which will either be an assignment next week or some kind of task. I haven't decided how to formulate the challenge yet, but you're going to have to come up with some ideas for this. So how do we take this information and apply it to making the best dating application that we can in terms of making that cheddar? So we're going to start with average male attractiveness. Now get ready to answer these questions in Discord or YouTube. I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions and I'll expect some answers. When women rate men on attractiveness, physical attractiveness, on a scale from 1 to 5. Now remember that this is a regular bell curve, 3's in the middle, there's an even distribution of scores. What does it look like in reality when women rate men? What is the average score for a dude on a scale from 1 to 5 getting rated by women? So let's say we showed men to 1,000 pictures of men to 1,000,000 women, and we had them score those pictures. What would be the average score? So it's like 2, 3. All right, looks like some 2s, some 3s, 1s. All right, cool. All right, how about the other way around? When men rate women on a scale from 1 to 5, what's the average score? So going back the other way, when men rate women on a scale from 1 to 5, so pick 1,000 women at random, we got 1,000,000 men to rate them. What's the average rating going to be when men rate women? So far, I'm seeing bigger numbers. I'm seeing 4s come up. Oh man, all 4s. So men are just not picky at all. I think everyone's like a 4 or a 5. Because if 4 is the average, then it's like way up. All right, okay. Most of the people responding are men, though. We got to get some ratings from people in the middle, or ratings from women for the men question too. Okay. Mostly 4s. It looks like mostly 4s, some 3s. All right. So the answer is that when women rate men, you're right. The average is a 2, but men are almost a perfect bell curve. It's tiny bit biased towards unattractiveness, but almost a perfect normal distribution, men rating women. So women tend to perceive about 55-60% of men as incredibly ugly. So about half the men that women see they consider to be incredibly ugly. And then only about 20% or so are considered to be attractive, and a very, very small amount of men are considered to be extremely physically attractive, but also a fairly small amount of women are considered to be extremely attractive. Although in terms of size, the magnitude of women who are considered extremely attractive is like 100 times plus larger than the number of men who are considered to be extremely attractive. Interesting, isn't it? Well, okay, let's go for age then. What age are women attracted to? So if you show women a bunch of pictures of men of a variety of ages, so take 1,000 women, show them millions of pictures of men, and what age are they going to be most attracted to? Now, for this, I want you to phrase the answer. You can phrase it in terms of X. So if a woman is aged X, what age of man is she most attracted to? So if a woman's aged X and she's attracted to people aged X, then she's attracted to people the same age as her. X plus 5 would be people who are 5 years older, or X minus 5, 5 years younger. Or you can just say a specific age. Maybe women are just attracted to people who are 18 years old. So the woman's age is X, and the age of the person she is most attracted to is what? So we got mostly X pluses. Yeah, mostly people think that women are attracted to older men. Some people just put a specific number, like 35. Okay, interesting. But most people phrase that in terms of X plus something. All right. Well, the answer is actually interesting. It contradicts most people's expectations. It is true that it's about X plus 3 in the age that most of you are at, which is probably why you have that impression. But it actually reverses as women age. So when women are under 30, they tend to prefer people who are slightly older. The more under 30 they are, the more older of a person they prefer. So at 20 and 21, they're looking 3 or so years older. By 29, it's almost even. And then at 30, it turns around and women start to prefer men who are slightly younger. Just slightly younger. Until you get into the 40s, and then it's significantly younger. So it reverses at a certain point. And this is just attractiveness. This is just men that look best to women. So for men at least, your best shot for looking attractive to a woman is to be within a few years of her, essentially regardless of her age, though at the age most of you are, to be slightly older. Okay, then what age are men attracted to? Let's do the same thing. Let's show men a bunch of pictures of women. If the man is aged X, what age of woman is most attractive to men? Again, is it X, the same age, or X plus 5, and men attracted to older women, X minus 5, and attracted to younger women, or is it a specific age, like 18? Let's not say under 18, because this is America, and you're not allowed to do that here. Someone's whipping out the functions now. I see when X is less than 30, X minus 2. So you think it turns around then? And then when X is greater than 30, then they want even younger. Okay, so you reverse it. Or not reverse it, it just becomes more and more intense. The older the man gets, the bigger he wants the age difference to be. That's an interesting one. You could definitely do something like that. Connor cheated. He's seen this chart. You can definitely look it up. I mean, I told you the name of the book, so you could look all these up. That would be kind of ruining it for you, though, wouldn't it? The answer is, as some people guessed, it's just 21. It really is just 21. It doesn't matter what age the man is. The women that look the most attractive are 20, 21, maybe 22. So men, well, at least they're consistent, if nothing else. Boy, do we not change throughout the course of our lives. Your average man just prefers one single age. Well, that disparity is already interesting, right? Because if you're running a dating site, you want to connect people with people that they're likely to match with. And if you just knew this, well, you would, what, connect all the men with 20-year-olds and show them none of the women? Or would you go the other way around and connect all the women with men who are within 3 years of their age and show only the 20 to 23-year-old men, the 20-year-old women? Obviously, the 20-year-old women are the most desired of both sexes, but there's not enough of them for everybody to go around, of course. And actually, the answer is more complex, and some of you didn't quite guess this, but insinuated it a little. Men are under 30 are more likely to date older women. They have a wide distribution of age ranges that they accept. So men under 30 are occasionally rating women in their 40s more attractive than women in their 20s. But then in their 30s, for some reason, that just kicks out. Once they reach their 30s, they no longer want anybody over the age of 35 and continue to think that women under 35 look best for essentially the rest of their lives, which is something that most people probably didn't expect and something that we probably wouldn't know if we didn't have a bunch of numbers from people's behavior on dating sites to back it up. And some people call this the cougar phenomenon, or MILF, or whatever you want to call it. And sure, apparently it's a real thing, statistically speaking. All right then, if that's what men and women want, okay, let's assume that we have a woman on some dating site and she's 20 years old, or puts her age as 20, and assume that anyone can contact anyone, which is what OkCupid was like. So it's not like Tinder or whatever, where you can only contact the people who the app matches you with. What do the ages of the men trying to contact that woman look like? Is it mostly other 20-year-olds? Is it mostly people over 30? Is it an even mix of people? Well, this isn't really a question you can answer in text, so I'll just show you the answer. It's kind of what you would expect. It's that most of the people contacting a 20-year-old woman are also in their 20s. So if you take a sample of 10,000 men and you take a single woman and see how many people reached out, it's about 100 in the 20s, the early 20s, from that sample of 10,000. And then goes down rapidly in the late 20s, and then people over 30, essentially, they're not going to try to contact that person. So although men consider women in their very early 20s to be the most attractive, it's pretty obvious that the reality of the situation is that that's not the way most relationships work. Some obviously do, but that's certainly not the average. And so most men are clever enough to know that their odds in that situation are pretty poor, and it's not really worth trying it out. But let's do the same question, and now the woman is 50 years old. What does the contact chart look like? Who is contacting who? Somebody mentioned that they'd love to see the graphs by religion, race, socioeconomic status, and education. And to you, I would say, that's why they took the blog down, man. Don't ask those questions. We might see some of that data later, just to make your answer to how to optimize for making money more interesting. But all right, what does it look like when the woman is 50? Well, at that point, it just is kind of a flat line. There's only 9 people for every 100 that there were at age 20. And this is because the population of single men pretty much halves every decade. So there are 10 million single men in America, age 20 to 24, and then 5 million, age 30 to 34, and then just 3.5 million, which is not quite half if you're counting, aged 40 to 44, and even less in their 50s, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a very small amount of contact by 20, and in fact you can see for all ages it's an interesting evolution over time. In their 20s, women get contacted a ton by men in their 20s. But at 25, if you did the integral, this would actually probably be a little bit larger. Because at 25, you've got men in the early 20s and men all the way up to the early 30s who are reaching out. It's a larger group of people, although the peak isn't as high. So there's not this flood of 20-year-olds here. There's not a flood of 25-year-olds that are interested, but there's a wider range of people who are interested. And that makes sense, of course, because to the left of this curve is just illegal, and those people aren't represented at all. So this is just moving into legality. But then by 30, the integrals become quite small. The curve's quite flat, although the range of ages accepted is wider. And then by 35, 40, 45, 50, it becomes flatter and flatter. The last thing we're going to look at today is types. Who gets more requests? Somebody who is, and for both genders, by the way, somebody who is approximately average to almost everybody, so someone who just gets a 3 from almost everybody, or somebody who is unattractive to most people, so let's say they get like a 1 or a 2 from 75% of the population, but to the rest of people, they're like a 4 and up. Because attractiveness is a really subjective thing. Those attractiveness scores are averages. If you ask 100 people to decide how attractive somebody is, well, for the very, very attractive people, there's going to be a pretty strong consensus. And for the very, very unattractive people, there's going to be a strong consensus. But for most of us, there's going to be a distribution of ratings where some people find us very unattractive, some people find us attractive. And again, men's scores much lower on average, so you kind of have to shift these numbers down a bit for men. But for both genders, the phenomenon is similar? Is it A or B? Is it the people who are about average who get the most requests, or is the people who are standouts? They're really unattractive to most people, but then some people, they stand out to for some reason. Well, it's only one person guessed, but that's fine. It's B. It's B, and it's B by quite a bit. In fact, the number of people who reach out to somebody who they personally rate a 4 or below a 4, so like a 3 or lower, is very, very small. Only like 1% of requests overall, or 1% of people reaching out, or people reaching out to somebody that they rated a 3 or lower. Almost everybody that contacts somebody else to try to have a relationship with them in online dating or in software-based dating, they're going to rate them a 4 or higher. So sometimes the things that make people stand out are like cosmetic things, big glasses, dyed hair, tattoos, piercing, whatever. Sometimes it's physical things like a big nose, being short, moles. But the moral of the story is that people have a type, and they will accept people who meet the type. They will reject people who meet a type that they don't like. But it's also not particularly hard once you've got a sample of what kind of men or women a particular person prefers to bend them into what kind of types of people they like, and then continue to show them those kinds of people. So if I rated a man who had piercings as a 4 or 5, and then you rated another man who had piercings as 4 or 5, it's pretty obvious that you like men with piercings, and you can continue to do so. So not particularly hard to bend people. And the last thing that I'll say before we break into the groups for the discussion is that we talked exclusively about heterosexual attractiveness here. And there's not as much information on homosexual attractiveness in dating apps, but it's something that you can consider for a bit of a bonus in terms of optimizing money, because of course, if you can get more people on board, you got a larger pool of people to work with. So something to keep in mind is, if this is how men and women behave in heterosexual attractiveness, think about how they would work in homosexual attractiveness. Do homosexual men also rate other men on the same evenly shaped bell curve? And likewise, do homosexual women rate homosexual women on the same skewed one where the average is a 2? Or is that different? Is it different because now they're, instead of women rating men, it's women rating women and men rating men? So maybe the men rate the men in the skewed form and the women rate the women in the more distributed one. Think about it. Not as much research on it, again, as OkCupid's heterosexual research, but something that you can probably find some information on. And you can always make a guess and then say what you would do if it were true. All right, so for the discussion today, leading into optimizing making money next week, we're going to split into either you think it's okay to optimize for making money in romantic software, dating apps, etc., or you think it's not okay. So if you're on the moral side, you think that software that helps people to find romance can be optimized to make money, and that's fine. And that in the process of optimizing your software to make money, it doesn't mean that nobody is going to find a relationship on there. And of course, if nobody found a relationship on there, you wouldn't make any money because people wouldn't stick around, probably. And again, very competitive market. But if you're on the moral side, you think it's okay to optimize those kinds of things to make money. If you're on the immoral side, you think that software that helps people connect should prioritize connecting people, full stop, should prioritize helping people find romance. Optimizing for anything else, such as making money, well, that's just wrong. So your top focus, you think, is optimizing for romance, not for your financial gain. And of course, it's still possible to make money while optimizing for romance, and you might even allow a similar focus, like maybe the app doesn't necessarily optimize for relationships that lead to marriage, maybe it optimizes for sex or something else. You might still call that optimizing for romance, it's just not money. So if you think that optimizing for money is okay, you're on the moral side. If you think that you can only optimize for things that are related to romance, you're on the immoral side. And if you're on the amoral side, you either think that those are the same, fundamentally, or you somehow think that you can do both. You can optimize for both money and romance without significantly impacting either, although you'll have to explain to me how you think that's possible. All right, cool. Let's head to the discussion for the day. I will see you in Discord.